Admiral Jinwoo Kim stood at the window of Earth's orbital command station, watching the blue planet turn slowly below. 15 years had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Council. 15 years of carefully following their rules, learning their customs, and proving that humans deserved a place among the stars. He thought those days had built something meaningful. He was wrong. The message came through on his personal console. Ambassador Taeyang Li's face appeared on the screen, and Jinwoo could see the anger in the young diplomat's eyes. Taeyang had always been calm, always professional. Not today. They voted against us, Taeyang said, his voice tight. 11-1. The council sided with the Valkyrie. Jinwoo felt his jaw tighten. Tell me everything. The story came out in short, bitter sentences. The Valkyrie Empire had accused Earth of violating treaty boundaries near the Outer Rim. The violation never happened. Earth had documentation, sensor logs, and testimony from 3 neutral species proving their innocence. None of it mattered. The Valkyrie were old, powerful, and influential. Humanity was new, weak, and expendable. The Council's decision was final. Earth would surrender Mars, Europa, and Titan to the Valkyrie Empire as reparations. 3 colonies, home to over 2 million humans, handed over like bargaining chips. I tried to object, Taeyang continued. High Prelate Vorn laughed at me. He called us primitive mammals playing at civilization. The council guards removed me from the chamber before I could finish speaking. Jinwoo closed his eyes. He had warned Earth's government about this. The galaxy didn't respect diplomacy without strength behind it. The council viewed humanity as children who needed to be managed, controlled, and occasionally punished to remind them of their place. What did the president say? Jinwoo asked. President Hana wants to negotiate. She believes we can find a peaceful solution. Taeyang's laugh was hollow. She still thinks they'll listen to reason. After the call ended, Jinwoo pulled up the classified files he had been reviewing for months. Old military doctrines from before first contact. Strategies Earth had promised to abandon when joining the Council. Plans for total warfare that the galaxy considered barbaric and outdated. He read through them again. His mind already working through possibilities the Council would never expect. Dr. Sora Bake found him there 3 hours later. The chief science officer carried 2 cups of coffee, and the tired look of someone who hadn't slept in days. You heard, she said, handing him a cup. I heard. Sora sat beside him, staring at the data scrolling across his screens. Those are pre-council war files. Jinwoo. What are you planning? Nothing yet. President Song wants diplomacy. I'm just preparing for what comes after diplomacy fails. You think it will fail? Jinwoo turned to look at her. Sora had been with him since the early days of Earth's space program. She understood the galaxy better than most, had friends among a dozen species, and believed deeply in the possibility of peaceful coexistence. But she was also a scientist. She understood evidence. The Council doesn't see us as equals, he said quietly. They see us as useful primitives. The Valkyrie see us as prey. Diplomacy only works between parties who respect each other. They don't respect us. Sora, they never have. She was quiet for a long moment. What happens if you're right? Then we remind them why humans survived 10,000 years of killing each other before we ever left Earth. 2 weeks later, the negotiations began. Earth sent its best diplomats to Concordia Station, a neutral facility in space controlled by the Council. President Song addressed the human worlds, urging patience and faith in the galactic community. She promised that reason would prevail, that the truth would shine through, that justice would be served. Captain Yuna Park didn't believe a word of it. She commanded the frigate Times Defiant Asterisk, currently on patrol near Luna. Yuna had grown up on Mars, in one of the colonies the Valkyrie now claimed as their own. Her family still lived there. The thought of them under Valkyrie control made her blood boil. Captain, we're receiving orders, her communications officer said. We're to maintain position and await further instructions. Maintain position, Yuna repeated. While our people are being handed over to aliens who think we're animals. She knew she shouldn't say it out loud. But her crew felt the same way. They were soldiers, trained to protect Earth and its colonies. Being ordered to stand down while their own people were abandoned felt like betrayal. Admiral Jinwoo's voice came through on a private channel an hour later. "Captain Park, I need you to trust me. Sir, things are going to get worse before they get better. When they do, I'll need officers who can make hard choices. Can you do that?" Yuna looked at her crew, at Earth rising in the distance, at the military vessel that felt more like a cage than a ship right now. "Yes, sir. I can do that." "Good. Stay ready. And Yuna, don't lose that anger. We're going to need it." Back on Earth, President Song prepared for her broadcast. She stood in front of cameras, ready to tell her people that patience and understanding would win the day. She believed it too. Humanity had fought among themselves for so long, survived so many wars. Surely that meant they were ready to embrace peace, to be better than their violent past. She didn't understand that the galaxy viewed that peaceful gesture as weakness. The Council had been at peace for 10,000 years, not because they had evolved beyond violence, but because they had forgotten how to fight. They resolved disputes through bureaucracy and voting, through influence and politics. The idea that someone might simply refuse to accept their decisions, might choose violence over submission, was foreign to them. High Prelate Vorn of the Valkyrie certainly didn't consider it. He stood in his flagship, orbiting one of the disputed colonies, watching human ships maintain their positions. The primitive species knew their place. They would accept the Council's decision because they had no choice. The Valkyrie Empire was ancient and powerful. Humanity was barely worth noticing. He would realize his mistake soon enough. They all would. The galaxy had forgotten what humans had always known. Peace is only possible when all sides choose it. Force it on someone unwilling, and you don't get peace. You get war. Admiral Jinwoo Kim continued his preparations in secret. Files were reviewed, officers were quietly contacted, and plans were made for contingencies the Council thought impossible. He hoped he was wrong. He hoped President Song's faith in diplomacy would be rewarded. He hoped the galaxy was better than he believed, but hope wasn't a strategy. And Jinwoo hadn't survived 40 years in military service by relying on hope. He relied on preparation, on knowing his enemy, and on understanding that sometimes the only way to achieve peace was to be willing to wage war so terrible that no one would dare threaten you again. The galaxy was about to learn that lesson. They just didn't know it yet. The Concordia station floated peacefully in neutral space, its white hull reflecting starlight. Inside, Ambassador Taeyang Lee sat across from the Valkyrie delegation, trying one more time to make them understand. 3 weeks of negotiations had gone nowhere. The Valkyrie refused to even acknowledge Earth's evidence. "The colonies belong to humanity," Taeyang said, keeping his voice steady. "We have legal claims going back 70 years. We have families there, communities, entire lives built over generations." High Prelate Vorn clicked his mandibles in what might have been laughter. "You have what we allow you to have. Human. The Council has decided. Accept it with grace, or lose even more." Dr. Sora Baek sat beside Taeyang, her scientific mind struggling to understand the illogic of it all. She had friends among the Valkyrie scientific community. Good people who shared research and ideas freely. But those people had no power here. The military caste ruled the Valkyrie Empire, and they saw humanity as nothing more than insects to be crushed or ignored. "We're wasting our time," Sora whispered to Taeyang. They never intended to negotiate. Before Taeyang could respond, alarms began screaming throughout the station. On the view screen, a Valkyrie battle fleet materialized from hyperspace, surrounding Concordia. Dozens of warships, their weapons already charging. "What is this?" Taeyang demanded, standing. The first shot struck Earth's diplomatic vessel, docked at Concordia's southern port. The ship exploded in silence, tearing apart in a burst of fire and debris. 300 humans died in that instant. Diplomats, scientists, crew members, and peace advocates, all vaporized because the Valkyrie decided they were inconvenient. Sora grabbed Taeyang and pulled him toward the emergency shelters. Around them, station personnel ran in panic as more explosions rocked Concordia. The Valkyrie were methodical, destroying every Earth vessel docked at the station, while leaving other species' ships untouched. This wasn't a accident. This was a message. In the shelter, Sora accessed the station's black box data through her neural link. What she found made her blood run cold. The Valkyrie fleet had been in position for 6 hours, waiting. The attack was planned, coordinated, and executed with precision. Every shot calculated to maximize damage while maintaining the fiction of an accident. Captain Una Park received the distress call 15 minutes after the attack began. She was near Luna when the message came through. Ambassador Taeyang's face on the screen, smoke and blood visible behind him. "They killed them all," he said, his voice breaking. 300 of our people. They murdered them, and they're going to say it was an accident. Una. They're going to... The transmission cut out. Una stood frozen on her bridge, unable to process what she had just witnessed. Then training took over. Battle stations. Set course for Concordia. Maximum speed. "Captain, we don't have authorization to enter neutral space," her navigator said. "I don't care. Our people need help. Move." But they were too late. By the time the Times Defiant Times reached Concordia, the Valkyrie fleet had withdrawn. The station was intact but scarred, and Earth's diplomatic ship was nothing but debris floating in space. Una's crew worked for hours, pulling survivors from the wreckage. They found 73. 327 were dead. Ambassador Taeyang and Dr. Sora survived. They sat in the Defiance Times medical bay, wrapped in thermal blankets, staring at nothing. Sora's hands shook as she uploaded the black box data to Earth's military network. Evidence. Proof of deliberate murder. It wouldn't matter. She already knew it wouldn't matter. The Galactic Council convened within hours. High Prelate Vorn stood before them, his translator rendering his speech into human language. A tragic accident occurred at Concordia Station. A weapons malfunction in our fleet resulted in unintended casualties. The Valkyrie Empire extends its deepest sympathies to the human species for this unfortunate incident. Earth's interim ambassador, a young woman named Gina Han, presented Sora's evidence. She showed the sensor logs, the targeting data, the communications between Valkyrie ships, proving premeditation. She spoke for 2 hours, laying out the case with precision and passion. The council deliberated for 10 minutes. Their verdict: accident. No investigation needed. The Valkyrie explanation was accepted without question. Earth was offered thoughts and sympathy, and nothing more. Gina Han walked out of the council chambers and immediately resigned. She would later become a prosecutor, but not for the council. For humanity. The Valkyrie, emboldened by the council's weakness, pushed further. Their fleets moved into the disputed colonies not with negotiation, but with force. They took Mars first, landing troops in the capital city. Human colonists were rounded up, processed, and shipped off-world for labor assignments. Then they took Europa, then Titan. And finally, they came for Luna itself, Earth's moon. The symbol of humanity's first steps into space, now occupied by aliens who viewed humans as property. Minho Choi was an engineer on Luna Colony when the Valkyrie arrived. He worked in the water reclamation facility, a job he loved, providing clean water for 50,000 people. He had a wife, Eunji, and a daughter, Haeun, who was 7 years old. She loved to draw pictures of Earth hanging in the sky above them. The Valkyrie soldiers came to their section on the 3rd day of occupation. Minho heard the screams first, then the gunfire. He told Eunji to hide with Haeun in the maintenance tunnels. He would distract the soldiers, buy them time to escape. He never saw them again. When he finally made it to the tunnels hours later, he found them both. A Valkyrie officer had discovered their hiding place. The officer was still there when Minho arrived, standing over their bodies, cleaning his weapon. Minho didn't remember attacking the soldier. He didn't remember the rage, the violence, the way he used his bare hands and a wrench to kill something twice his size. He only remembered waking up in a cell, covered in blood that wasn't his own, and feeling absolutely nothing. Captain Una Park led the evacuation of Luna 3 weeks later. She managed to extract 20,000 civilians before the Valkyrie blockade tightened. Half her crew died covering the retreat. She personally carried Minho Choi onto her ship, the man silent and broken, staring at nothing. The footage leaked despite the Velkari's best efforts. A news drone had captured it. A Velkari officer standing over the body of a human child. Weapons still smoking. The image spread across every human network, every colony, every ship. It became a symbol. A reminder of what the peaceful galactic community allowed. President Hana Song addressed humanity one final time as a peacekeeper. She stood before the cameras, tears visible on her face, and spoke words that changed everything. We tried their way. We begged for justice from those who have none to give. We showed them our evidence, our truth, our pain. They dismissed it all. They vote in their chambers while our children die in the streets. So now we must remind them of something they have forgotten. We are humanity. We survived ice ages and plagues. We survived wars that consumed our entire planet. We survived ourselves. And now, we will survive them. She paused, taking a breath that seemed to carry the weight of the entire species. We will not beg anymore. We will not negotiate with those who murder our people and call it an accident. We will do what humans have always done when pushed to the edge. We will fight. And they will learn why that is a mistake. Admiral Jin-Woo Kim received full military authority within the hour. He recalled every ship, every soldier, every operative from across human space. The files he had been reviewing in secret were now official doctrine. Earth's factories began retooling. Research labs shifted to weapons development. Training grounds filled with volunteers. Minho Choi was among them. When the military recruiter asked him why he wanted to join, Minho didn't speak. He just showed them the picture of his daughter, the one he carried in his pocket. The recruiter nodded and handed him the enlistment forms. The galaxy watched humanity's reaction with confusion. They expected surrender, or perhaps futile protests. Instead, Earth went silent. All communication with Council worlds stopped. Human ships withdrew to Earth's system. The borders closed. High Prelate Vorn laughed when he heard, "The primitive species is sulking. Give them time. They will accept reality." But Admiral Jin-Woo Kim wasn't sulking. He was preparing for war. Not the ritualized, bureaucratic conflicts the galaxy understood. Real war. The kind humans had perfected over 10,000 years of killing each other. The kind the galaxy had forgotten was possible. The storm was coming, and it would shock them all. 6 months passed in silence. Earth's borders remained closed to all Council traffic. No messages came from human space. No trade, no diplomacy, no communication of any kind. To the Galactic Council, it seemed humanity had accepted defeat and withdrawn to sulk in isolation. They were wrong. Inside Earth's system, a transformation was happening. Every factory, every shipyard, every research facility worked around the clock. Admiral Jin-Woo Kim stood in the main operations center, coordinating the largest military mobilization in human history. Fleet Commander Doyun Huang reporting, "Sir," a voice said. Doyun was a veteran of the colony wars, a man who understood space combat better than anyone alive. He had spent the last months retrofitting civilian vessels for military use. "Status report," Jinwoo said. "We've converted 200 civilian freighters into weapons platforms. They won't win beauty contests, but they'll carry enough firepower to surprise anyone who thinks they're looking at cargo ships." The commercial fleet has volunteered in full. Every captain, every crew member wants to fight. Jinwoo nodded. The galaxy thought in terms of warships and military vessels. They would never expect Earth's merchant marine to become a strike force. It was another advantage the Council's peace had denied them. They had forgotten that in real war, everything becomes a weapon. Dr. Sora Baek entered the room carrying a data tablet, exhaustion visible on her face. She hadn't slept more than a few hours in weeks, working with a team of scientists on something the Council thought impossible. "It works," she said simply. "The quantum signature jammer. We tested it this morning. Our test ship was invisible to every sensor type the Valkyrie use. They literally cannot see us coming." Jinwoo allowed himself a small smile. "How many can we produce?" "Nari Yoon's team has the production line ready. We can outfit 50 ships immediately, with more coming online every week after that. Sora paused. Jinwoo, are you sure about this? Once we start, there's no going back. They killed our people. They took our colonies. They stand over the bodies of our children and call it an accident. Jinwoo's voice was quiet, but hard as steel. We're already past the point of no return. Now we just finish what they started. In the training facilities beneath Earth's surface, Hyunwoo Nam drilled his Marines harder than they had ever been pushed. Hyunwoo was Special Forces. A man who had trained soldiers for 20 years. Now he was training them for something different. Not peacekeeping or colony defense. War. Zero-gravity combat is about momentum, he told his troops. The enemy will expect you to move like they do. Slow and careful. Don't. Be fast. Be violent. Be everywhere at once. Make them afraid of the dark because that's where we live now. Among the trainees was Minho Choi, the engineer who had lost everything on Luna. He wasn't a natural soldier. He was too old, too slow, too weighted down by grief. But what he lacked in skill, he made up for in determination. Hyunwoo saw it and pushed him harder, knowing that men like Minho were dangerous in ways the enemy would never expect. They had nothing left to lose. The weapons came from factories working triple shifts. Nuclear-pumped lasers that the galaxy banned as too destructive. Kinetic kill vehicles that turned simple mass into devastating weapons. Nanite swarms that could eat through hull plating like acid. All the terrible tools humanity had developed during their centuries of warfare, now being produced in massive quantities. Captain Yuna Park walked through the shipyards, watching her new command take shape. The Times, Defiant Times, had been damaged beyond repair during the Luna evacuation. Now she was being given something else. One of the new ghost ships, invisible to enemy sensors, armed with weapons the galaxy had never seen. What are you going to call her? Doyun Huang asked, walking beside her. Yuna looked at the sleek, dark vessel. The Times Vengeance *. What else? The plan was simple in concept, complex in execution. Captain Yuna would lead 12 ghost ships into the Valkyrie home system. They would strike every military orbital platform simultaneously, destroying the enemy's defensive network in one coordinated attack. Then they would withdraw before the Valkyrie could even understand what happened. It was bold. It was dangerous. It was exactly the kind of operation the Council would never expect from primitive mammals. Admiral Jinwoo briefed the strike team personally. 12 captains, 12 crews, all volunteers who understood they might not come back. Yuna stood among them, listening as Jinwoo laid out the mission. You'll jump in at extreme range, using the outer asteroid belt for cover. The jamming technology will hide you until you're in position. When I give the signal, you fire everything at once. 7 minutes. That's how long you have before their reinforcements arrive. Hit them hard, hit them fast, and get out. What about civilian casualties? One captain asked. The platforms are military installations. We've confirmed minimal civilian presence. But understand this, we are at war. The enemy didn't care about our civilians. I'm not saying be cruel. I'm saying be effective. Disabled platforms surrender. Destroyed platforms can't hurt us again. Your judgment call. The briefing ended. The captains returned to their ships. Yuna stood on the bridge of the Times, Vengeance *, watching Earth disappear behind them as they jumped to hyperspace. Beside her, Minho Choi worked at an engineering station. He had volunteered for the mission, using his expertise with space stations to identify the best targets. Are you scared? Yuna asked him quietly. Minho shook his head. I died on Luna. Everything after is just momentum. The journey took 3 days. 12 ships moving through hyperspace, invisible and silent, carrying humanity's rage toward the heart of the Valkyrie Empire. They emerged in the outer system, using the asteroid belt exactly as planned. The Valkyrie sensors swept past them without noticing. Yuna positioned her ship carefully, targeting the largest orbital platform. Around her, the other 11 captains did the same. 12 platforms. 12 ships. 1 chance. All vessels report ready, her communications officer said. Yuna opened a channel to Admiral Jinwoo, back on Earth. We're in position. Awaiting your order. There was a pause. Yuna could imagine Jinwoo sitting in his command center, knowing that the next words out of his mouth would start a war that would reshape the galaxy. Finally, his voice came through, calm and certain. Execute. The Time's Vengeance Times fired first, its new weapons tearing into the orbital platform's structure. Nuclear fire bloomed in the void. Around the Velkari homeworld, 11 other platforms died in the same instant. The coordinated strike was perfect. In 7 minutes, the Velkari's entire defensive network was destroyed. Casualties were massive. 400,000 Velkari military personnel died in those 7 minutes. Not civilians. Not children. Not innocents. Soldiers. The same ones who had occupied Luna, who had processed humans like cattle, who had stood over dead children and called it acceptable. Yuna's crew worked in disciplined silence, firing until their weapons were empty, then preparing for the jump back to hyperspace. The Velkari fleet scrambled, trying to respond, but they couldn't see what they were fighting. The ghost ships were already gone, jumping away before the enemy even understood what had happened. As the Time's Vengeance Times entered hyperspace, Yuna transmitted one message on all frequencies. It was simple, direct, terrifying. You wanted to see primitive mammals? Now watch us hunt. The message reached the Galactic Council within hours. The footage followed. Velkari platforms burning, explosions tearing through military installations, humanity's ships appearing from nowhere and vanishing just as quickly. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Council witnessed real war. Not diplomatic maneuvering or economic pressure. Violence. Pure, efficient, brutal violence. The emergency session was chaos. Representatives from 12 species shouted at each other, demanding explanations, calling for action, and mostly expressing shock. This wasn't how conflicts were resolved. This wasn't how species behaved in civilized space. High Prelate Vorn, broadcast from his flagship, demanded council intervention. The humans have gone mad. They attack without warning, without honor, without mercy. The council must act. The council voted for sanctions against Earth. Trade embargoes, travel restrictions, diplomatic isolation. Everything short of military action, because none of them wanted to face what humanity had just demonstrated. Admiral Jinwoo's response was broadcast across every channel in council space. He appeared on screens throughout the galaxy, his expression calm, but his words cutting. We withdraw from your council. We reject your laws. Your justice is hollow. Your peace is built on the graves of those too weak to resist. You taught us that in this galaxy, might makes right. Thank you for the lesson. We learned it well. The transmission ended. Earth's ambassador to the council, what little presence remained, packed up and left. Humanity was alone now. No allies among the council species. No protection under their laws. No hope of diplomatic resolution. But they had something else. They had weapons the galaxy feared. They had warriors willing to use them. And they had a reason that burned hotter than any sun. The Velkari Empire would fall, the Council would watch, and the galaxy would learn a new truth. Humans didn't want war. But if you gave them one anyway, they would finish it. The war that followed wasn't like anything the galaxy had seen in 10,000 years. The Council species fought through votes and negotiations, through economic pressure and diplomatic maneuvering. They had forgotten that war could be something else entirely. Humanity remembered. Admiral Jinwoo Kim commanded Earth's forces from a mobile command ship that jumped between systems, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. Around him, his staff coordinated attacks across dozens of Velkari holdings simultaneously. This wasn't a battle. It was extermination. Minho Choi sat at his engineering station, monitoring the autonomous hunter-killer drones his team had designed. The drones were small, intelligent, and relentless. They tracked Velkari ships through hyperspace using the unique signatures their engines produced. Once they found a target, they attached themselves to the hull and waited. When the ship next jumped to hyperspace, the drone detonated, tearing the vessel apart between dimensions. We have confirmation on 15 kills in the last hour, Minho reported, his voice flat and mechanical. The drones are adapting to Valkyrie countermeasures faster than they can deploy new ones. Jinwoo watched the tactical display update. Red markers indicating destroyed Valkyrie ships appeared faster than the computers could process them. In 3 months of fighting, Earth's forces had destroyed 60% of the Valkyrie military fleet. The empire that had ruled this sector for thousands of years was collapsing, but it wasn't just about destroying ships. Hyunwoo Nam's Marines specialized in something more personal. They boarded Valkyrie vessels, moving through the corridors like ghosts. They didn't come to capture the ships. They came for intelligence and revenge. Hyunwoo led a team onto a Valkyrie command cruiser. Their suits equipped with Sora's jamming technology, making them invisible to internal sensors. They moved silently through the ship, planting explosives in the reactor core, downloading data from the central computers, and leaving behind a simple message in the captain's quarters. "We remember Luna." The Valkyrie crew never knew humans were aboard until the ship exploded 3 hours after the Marines had already escaped. The pattern repeated across the fleet. Valkyrie commanders became paranoid, seeing human soldiers in every shadow, jumping at every unexplained sound. Fear became a weapon as effective as any missile. Captain Yuna Park commanded a squadron of ghost ships that the Valkyrie came to call the Ghosts of Terra. They appeared from nowhere, struck with overwhelming force, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. The Valkyrie tried everything to detect them. New sensors, different frequencies, even psychic abilities from allied species. Nothing worked. Dr. Sora Bake's jamming technology was too advanced, built on principles the galaxy hadn't explored because they had no need for stealth in their ritualized conflicts. In human history, stealth had been refined over centuries of warfare. Now that expertise was being used against an enemy that had never needed to defend against it. Yuna's latest mission was psychological as much as military. She broadcast the evidence of Valkyrie war crimes on every channel in Council space. Images of brutalized humans paired with footage of burning Valkyrie bases. Her message was clear and simple. This is what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. The broadcasts reached billions across the galaxy. Many Council species were horrified, not just by the Valkyrie crimes but by humanity's response. Others quietly approved, seeing justice where the Council had offered only empty sympathy. Some species that had suffered under Valkyrie occupation began sending covert messages to Earth, offering intelligence and support. The Valkyrie Empire was fracturing. Conquered species saw humanity's success and began their own rebellions. The Valkyrie military, stretched thin fighting Earth, couldn't suppress uprisings across their territory. Planets that had been under Valkyrie control for generations declared independence, knowing that humanity would protect them where the Council never had. General Seojun Kang commanded the ground forces liberating these worlds. He was a careful, methodical officer who planned every operation to minimize civilian casualties. When his troops entered occupied territories, they came not as conquerors but as liberators, distributing food and medicine, helping establish local governments, and ensuring the Valkyrie occupation forces were arrested rather than massacred. "We're not like them," Seojun told his officers. "We fight because we must. But we don't become monsters to defeat monsters. Remember that. But some fights required monsters." When the Valkyrie used civilian populations as shields, hiding their military bases in population centers, humanity found ways around it. Precision strikes guided by intelligence from local resistance fighters. Special forces teams that extracted Valkyrie commanders from their bunkers without harming innocents. It was harder, slower, more dangerous for the human troops. They did it anyway. Within 3 months, humanity had liberated 4 species from Valkyrie control. Within 4 months, they had blockaded the Valkyrie homeworld itself. The Empire's supply lines were cut. Their reinforcements couldn't reach the front. Their communication networks were compromised by human cyber warfare. They were isolated, surrounded, and running out of options. The Galactic Council watched in stunned silence. Representatives who had dismissed humanity as primitive mammals now saw the most sophisticated military campaign in modern galactic history. The Council debated intervention, but every species that considered it looked at the casualty reports and declined. No one wanted to face Earth's military machine. Admiral Jinwoo prepared the final assault carefully. He didn't want to invade the Velkhari homeworld. Urban warfare would cause massive casualties on both sides and turn the human forces into occupiers rather than liberators. Instead, he planned a demonstration that would leave no doubt about humanity's capabilities. General Sojun Kang commanded the operation from his flagship in orbit around the Velkhari homeworld. Beside him, Yuna Park coordinated the fleet movements, while Sora Baek monitored civilian evacuation efforts. They had broadcast warnings for 3 days, giving Velkhari civilians time to leave the capital city. "Sir, civilian evacuation is at 92%, Sora reported. The remaining 8% are government officials and military personnel who refuse to leave. Jinwoo's face appeared on the command screen. "General Kang, you have authorization to proceed. 1 target. The Imperial Palace. Show them what precision means." A single human warship, the Times Indomitable Asterisk, moved into low orbit. It was Yuna's ship, earned through months of successful operations. The vessel aligned itself above the Velkhari Imperial Palace, and Jinwoo's face appeared on every screen across the planet. "People of the Velkhari homeworld, this is Admiral Jinwoo Kim of the Terran Defense Force. Your empire murdered our civilians. It occupied our worlds. It called us animals and treated us as such. Your emperor and his government have 6 hours to surrender unconditionally. Dismantle the military apparatus of your empire, and return every being you have enslaved. If they refuse, we will demonstrate what human precision looks like. Evacuate the government district. This is your only warning." The emperor's response came within minutes. Broadcast across the fleet. "Humanity are primitives playing at war. We do not negotiate with animals. We will never surrender to." The transmission cut off as the Times Indomitable Times fired. A single kinetic projectile, a rod of tungsten accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, struck the Imperial Palace. The impact released energy equivalent to a nuclear weapon but without the radiation. The palace simply ceased to exist, vaporized in an instant, along with everyone who had refused to evacuate. The Emperor survived. He had been in a bunker 3 kilometers away, but his seat of power, the symbol of Velkhari dominance that had stood for 5,000 years, was gone. In its place was a crater 300 meters deep. Jinwoo's voice came through again. 5 hours remain. Choose wisely. The surrender came in 4 hours and 17 minutes. The Emperor himself appeared on screen, his mandibles trembling, his voice defeated. The Velkhari Empire surrenders unconditionally. 1. Across human space, celebrations erupted. On Earth, people poured into the streets, crying and cheering and holding each other. On the liberated worlds, freed populations celebrated with their human liberators. In the fleet, soldiers who had fought for months allowed themselves to feel relief. But in the command center, Admiral Jinwoo didn't celebrate. He looked at the casualty reports. 100,000 human service members dead. Millions of Velkhari military casualties. Countless civilians displaced by the war. The victory was real, but the cost was devastating. Captain Yuna Park found him there, staring at the names scrolling across his screen. "We won, sir." "We survived," Jinwoo corrected. Winning would mean this never happened. Winning would mean Ambassador Taeyang and those 300 diplomats lived to see peace. Winning would mean Minho's family was still alive. "We didn't win. Yuna, we just made sure they lost worse than we did." Yuna was quiet for a moment. "What happens now?" "Now we make sure this never happens again, to us or to anyone else." The galaxy watched the surrender broadcast. Council species that had dismissed humanity saw the Velkhari Emperor, ruler of an empire that had stood for millennia, brought to his knees by a species barely 2 centuries into space travel. It was shocking. It was terrifying. It changed everything. The council convened an emergency session once more, but this time, they weren't debating sanctions against Earth. They were debating how to coexist with a species that had just proven itself the most dangerous military force in known space. And in human space, Admiral Jinwoo began planning for the peace. Because winning the war was one thing. Ensuring it meant something. Ensuring the sacrifice mattered. Ensuring nothing like this ever happened again, that was the real challenge. That was what would define whether humanity's revenge had been justice or just another chapter in an endless cycle of violence. The galaxy was about to find out which. The trial began 6 months after the Velkhari surrender. The Galactic Council had resisted at first, claiming that internal matters of member species were not subject to Council jurisdiction. Earth's response was simple. The Velkhari were no longer a member species. Their empire was dissolved. Their leaders would face justice. The Council agreed rather than face the alternative. Jinahan stood in the prosecution chamber, looking at the 17 Velkhari military commanders arranged before her. High Prelate Vorn sat among them, his mandibles clicking nervously. These were the beings who had ordered the Concordia massacre, who had overseen the occupation of human worlds, who had treated an entire species as animals to be exploited. Gina was young for such an important role, barely 30. But she had survived Concordia. She had watched friends die in that attack. She had spent months preparing this case, assembling evidence with Dr. Sora Bake's help, ensuring that every claim could be proven beyond doubt. The prosecution will demonstrate 3 key facts, Gina began, her voice steady despite the enormity of the moment. First, that the attack on Concordia Station was premeditated murder, not an accident. Second, that the occupation of human colonies involved systematic abuse and exploitation of civilian populations. Third, that these actions were ordered and approved by the commanders standing before you today. For 3 weeks, Gina presented her case. Sensor logs from the Concordia attack, showing Velkhari ships in position hours before they fired. Communications intercepts, proving the commanders knew they were targeting civilians. Testimony from survivors, including Ambassador Taeyang Lee, who described watching his colleagues die. Dr. Sora Bake testified about the black box data she had recovered. The scientific evidence was irrefutable. The Velkhari defense tried to dismiss it as fabricated. But Sora had worked with Velkhari scientists for years. Some of them testified on her behalf, confirming the data's authenticity even though it meant betraying their own government. Then came the testimony from the colonies. Freed slaves from a dozen species, humans among them, describing the labor camps, the brutality, the casual cruelty of the occupation. Minho Choi took the stand and spoke for the first time about finding his family's bodies. The courtroom was silent except for his quiet voice describing that moment. The defense argued that this was war, that casualties happen, that the Velkhari had acted within their rights as a council member species. It fell flat. Everyone in the chamber had seen the evidence. Everyone knew the truth. The verdict came after 2 days of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. The Velkhari military commanders would spend the rest of their lives in prison. High Prelate Vorn, who had laughed at human diplomats and called them primitive mammals, would die in a human detention facility, stripped of power and status. But the trial was about more than punishment. It established a precedent. The Galactic Council had spent 10,000 years avoiding consequences for powerful species. Now they watched as those same species faced justice. The message was clear. Humanity would not tolerate impunity, not for themselves and not for anyone else. The Galactic Council convened to discuss what they called the human problem. All 11 remaining member species sent their highest representatives. They gathered in the Grand Chamber where, years ago, they had voted to give human colonies to the Velkhari. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The debate lasted for hours. Some species wanted sanctions. Others suggested appeasement. A few nervously proposed military action. Each idea was quickly dismissed. Sanctions were meaningless against the most powerful military force in known space. Appeasement would only encourage human dominance. And military action? No one was willing to face what the Velkhari had faced. Finally, Admiral Jinwoo Kim addressed the council. He stood where Ambassador Taeyang had once stood, begging for justice that never came. But Jinwoo wasn't begging. He was dictating terms. Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council permanently, he said. We have no interest in your politics or your bureaucracy. We establish a 50 light-year exclusion zone around all human space. No council ships enter without invitation. Any violation will be treated as an act of war. The council representatives shifted uncomfortably. Jinwoo continued. Furthermore, any aggression against humanity or our allies will be met with total warfare. not your ritualized diplomatic conflicts, not your economic pressure. War as we understand it. War, as you have now witnessed. We will not strike first, but if you strike us, we will finish it. President Hanasong joined him, her expression harder than it had been during the peace negotiations. The species freed from Valkyrie rule are now under Earth's protection. We will help them rebuild, defend them from aggression, and ensure they have the freedom to choose their own futures. This is non-negotiable. The Council had no choice but to agree. The vote was unanimous, though several representatives looked physically ill as they cast it. Earth was free, independent, and terrifying. Dr. Sora Bake published her research paper 3 months later on the tactical advantages of species-level trauma. Why Humanity Excels at Warfare became the most widely read scientific document in galactic history. In it, she explained something the Council had never considered. Species that evolved in paradise, that reached the stars without major conflicts, had no framework for understanding war. They thought in terms of negotiation and compromise, because that's all they had ever known. But humanity had spent 10,000 years fighting itself, developing strategies and tactics for conflicts where the stakes were survival itself. We are not better than you, Sora wrote. We are not smarter or stronger or more advanced. We are traumatized. We carry the weight of countless wars, genocides, and conflicts in our collective memory. That trauma taught us things you never needed to learn. How to kill efficiently. How to endure suffering. How to keep fighting when all hope is lost. You see this as primitive. We see it as survival. The paper shocked the galactic academic community. Some dismissed it as human arrogance. Others recognized it as a warning. A few species began quietly studying human military history, trying to understand what they might face if they ever made Earth an enemy. 5 years passed. The galaxy adjusted to its new reality. Minho Choi became the chief engineer of Earth's expanded fleet. He designed new ships, trained new crews, and never forgot why he did any of it. His quarters on every ship he served on contained a single photo. A little girl drawing a picture of Earth. He kept it to remember, and to ensure he never forgot what they were protecting. Hyunwoo Nam trained soldiers from the freed species, teaching them Earth's combat doctrines. Some learned quickly, adapting to the aggressive tactics humans favored. Others struggled, their peaceful natures unsuited for violence. Hyunwoo adapted his teaching to each species, finding ways to help them defend themselves without losing who they were. Admiral Jinwoo Kim retired after ensuring humanity's defenses were secure. He spent his remaining years writing, documenting everything that had happened so future generations would understand the cost of peace and the price of war. He died at 73, remembered as the man who had saved humanity and changed the galaxy. Captain Yuna Park took his place as Supreme Commander of Earth's Defense Forces. She ruled with the same careful balance Jinwoo had maintained. Ready for war, but hoping for peace. Strong enough to deter aggression, but restrained enough to avoid becoming the oppressors they had fought against. Dr. Sora Bake led the Terran Alliance Science Council, working to help liberated species rebuild their worlds. She maintained friendships across the galaxy, proving that humans could be more than warriors. Her research helped develop new technologies that benefited everyone, not just Earth. She showed the galaxy that humanity's greatest strength wasn't violence but adaptation. The Terran Accord grew. 7 species joined in the first year, drawn by Earth's promise of protection without domination. They built something different from the Council, an alliance based on mutual respect and shared defense rather than bureaucratic control and ancient hierarchies. The Galactic Council watched from a distance. Some species resented Earth's independence and influence. Others quietly admired it. A few opened diplomatic channels, seeking partnerships outside the Council framework. The galaxy was changing, and Earth was the catalyst. On the ruins of the Valkyrie Imperial Palace, now a memorial to all victims of the war, workers installed a final plaque. It was written in every major galactic language, placed where the Emperor's throne had once stood. Thousands visited it each day, reading the words and trying to understand what they meant. Here fell an empire that mistook patience for cowardice, diplomacy for weakness, and mercy for surrender. Humanity did not seek this war, but we finished it. Let this stand as warning to all who would threaten the innocent. We are the species that survived ice ages, plagues, and ourselves. We are Earth. We remember. We endure. We will not yield. In the council chambers, representatives debated new policies and traded influence. But they did so, knowing that their decisions no longer controlled the galaxy. There was a power outside their control now, a species that had proven itself capable of reshaping the political landscape through force of arms. They called it many things. The human threat, the Earth problem, the warrior species. But what they really meant was simple. They were afraid. For 10,000 years, the Council had maintained peace through careful management and diplomatic pressure. Now they maintained it because humanity was watching, and no one wanted to give Earth a reason to intervene. In human space, life went on. Children played in parks on Mars. Families worked in the water reclamation facilities on Luna. And traders moved between Earth's colonies, carrying goods and stories. The scars of war remained, but so did the determination to make the sacrifice mean something. Ambassador Taeyang Li, who had survived Concordia and witnessed humanity's transformation from peace-seeking diplomats to feared warriors, gave a speech on the anniversary of the war's end. He stood before a crowd of thousands, human and alien alike, and spoke honestly about what they had accomplished and what it had cost. We wanted to be better than our violent past, he said. We wanted to prove that humanity could evolve beyond warfare. And in some ways, we did. We used our capacity for violence not to conquer, but to protect. Not to dominate, but to liberate. We became what the galaxy needed us to be. Strong enough to enforce justice when the Council would not. He paused, looking at the faces in the crowd. But we paid a price. We lost our innocence. We can never again claim to be a peaceful species. We know what we're capable of now, and so does everyone else. The question is, what do we do with that knowledge? The answer became clear over the following years. Earth didn't build an empire. They built a coalition. They didn't conquer their neighbors. They defended them. They didn't force their way of life on others. They gave species the freedom to choose their own paths. And when threats emerged, when aggressors rose to threaten the weak, humanity responded. Not with the overwhelming brutality they had shown the Valkyrie, but with the minimum force necessary to restore peace. They had learned something the Council never understood. Power without restraint is tyranny, but restraint without power is helpless. The galaxy learned to live with Earth. Some species thrived in the new order. Others resented the change. Most simply adapted, recognizing that the universe they had known was gone, replaced by something more complicated and perhaps more honest. And deep in space, on ships jumping between stars, human crews maintained their vigilance. They trained for conflicts they hoped would never come. They remembered fallen comrades and lost colonies. They carried the weight of being the galaxy's warriors, the species that others feared and some relied upon. They were Earth. They remembered, they endured, and they would never yield again.